By the end of this video, you will know how to turn this into this. Hi, I'm Claudia and welcome back to Mixing Breakdown Room. Welcome back to our basics series. We talked about the basics of compression, and if you haven't watched that video, you should go and watch it first. You can click on this link here. If you've watched it, welcome, because today we're going to talk about EQ, equalization. So the reason why we're covering compression and EQ because 80% of a mix is actually covered by compression and EQ. After this video, you will know everything you need to know about EQ, how to adjust to achieve what you want and not just try a bunch of things and hope for the best. So what is EQ for, you may ask? And there are two things. First, EQ creates separation between instruments. For example, if there is an instrument masking the vocal, then it can create separation to help the vocal kind of stand out in a mix. There's also a second thing into EQ, which is enhancing an individual instrument. So I have an example here again. Let's listen to her on her own solo without this tonal boosting. She'll sound something like this.
Don't play hard to get, but I'll never do it back. I'll be chillin', I'll let you be my jack.
And now we can add some air.
Don't play hard to get, but I'll never do it back. I'll be chillin', I'll let you be my jack. Don't play hard to get, but I'll never do it back. I'll be chillin', I'll let you be my jack.
Love air. Air is like glitter. Point number 1 and 2 together makes a great tonal balance of a mix. Although EQ are applied into individual tracks, remember that the goal is to sound good and balanced together. Before we jump into any practical teaching you how to use EQ, remember all frequencies, they can be good and pleasant. You might have heard some people say like,
certain frequencies sound muddy, so like always cut it.
and there are no bad frequencies. It's more about the balance and the tonal shaping of a mix. I want to define some frequency ranges for you guys first. This is a very simplified way of explaining the frequency ranges. If you don't have a tonal library in your head, you can use this diagram in front of you as a starting point. But ultimately, I would really encourage everyone to build your own tonal library and have your own definition of frequency ranges. For the sake of this video, we're just going to talk about the ranges in this way. So, for example, we have sub, which is below 100 Hertz. Low mid, which is 100 to 500 Hertz. Mid is like 500 to 1K. High mids, 1K to 4K. High, 4K to 10K. And air, which is what I talked about, the glitter. Feel free to screenshot this, by the way, if it helps you. So let's jump right into the parameters. EQ is a frequency-specific volume fader. Why do I say that it's a frequency-specific volume fader? Because I can pull this up and say like, oh, I want more, let's say 1K. And I can just pull it up and you essentially add it 1K by 6 dB, or you minus 1K by 6 dB. Pull any specific point and you can like boost or cut. Then I want to talk about shapes. Here, this is the classic bell shape. It's a bell shape and there's a specific range. You can adjust the Q factor, which is like how wide and how narrow, meaning how much in the range you're affecting essentially with your volume. So instead of like thinking about specific frequencies, try to think about specific frequency ranges. So that is the reason why we kind of talked about defining the ranges earlier, because it will be really helpful for us later in the practical side of EQ is to identify which are the frequency range that we need some treatment. So instead of like thinking like, oh, I know exactly 408.56 hertz has the problem, because honestly, if you are doing such narrow, this is called notching, like these kind of things, is actually tend to use on, for example, there are some weird overtones or harmonics in a snare drum, or you have like a specific noise that you want to cut away. That's pretty much the only place I would do that. Yeah, so just remember, cut what you need and leave the good stuff. A high pass filter, or I like to call it low cut, because you're literally cutting the lows. The dB per octave here is how steep it is. It's just how extreme you want it to attenuate. This is one of the most common move, is that, for example, if you have unwanted noise in a vocal, you will want to cut off the sub. No one's voice can go that low, basically. And maybe there's like aircon sounds or electrical hum or that kind of thing. You can always just try to cut it away and it will clean up your mix. Or if you want to do anything, this is called low pass filter or high cut, which is cutting out highs away. That can be really useful in some cases, like for example, shaping a reverb, hoping there's no like CCs in your reverb sound. Last but not the least, I want to talk about shelf. So shelf is not the most common shape that people would use, but I actually personally find it very useful. Like for example, if I want to boost the high frequency, let's say, let's use 1000 hertz again. So at 1K, I boost here. From this point onwards, like around 1K onwards, all of this is boost, all the way up to the air. And this is very useful, for example, when I want maybe like a vocal, I want more air tone, I can literally just pull this up and all of the air tone will be boosted. With the bell, if I just pull this up here, it will actually taper off at a higher frequency. The sides actually taper off. For a shelf, it's very useful for me to decide this at this point onwards, everything will be boosted in the same level. And the same goes to bass. For the bass, sometimes it's useful if you want maybe 100 hertz onwards, everything you want to boost in the same level, then you would use a low shelf. High shelf and low shelf is not just for boosting, actually for cutting is very useful too. For example, if I do a low cut here, when you do a low cut, all of this signal is gone. But there are some cases where I still want the bass to be here. I just want the level to be slightly lower. Then it will be super useful to use a low shelf instead, because I can now control from 200 hertz onwards. This level here on the signal is lower in volume, but the signal is still here and I can still have the bass frequencies. And the same goes with the high shelf too. Like sometimes I want the air to be here but just slightly less. When are the times that I would do this is maybe perhaps if there are some ad-libs in a song where the lead vocal is in the middle, but there are ad-libs that I want it to be audible, but I don't want it to take too much of the air and the attention. This is a really useful way to cut off a little bit of the air. You still have the air, but just slightly less than the lead, so that it'll sound slightly further away. So that's it. That is all the shapes that you can use as tools to help you shape the sound. So now that we know cutting can help create separations between instruments and boosting can highlight certain frequencies in certain instruments. But how do we find the frequency range to do so? Earlier I talked about like, oh, I know exactly the voice that needs air. But how do I know that? So in this part, we're going to talk about how do we find the frequency ranges that needs treatment. A lot of people are confused by this part. And this is the most important part of this video. Pretty much maybe the only part you need to watch. By the way, if you want to know how an EQ works in a vocal mixing chain, we have a free 4-step vocal mixing guide down in the description box. It will take you through the whole process of a vocal chain, and I hope it helps you. People tend to do one very common mistake, which is they try to boost and sweep along to find the frequency they don't like and cut.
And then they boost again, they find the frequency they don't like, they cut, and they cut, and they cut.
If you start to see your EQ look something like this is a red flag. This cannot be right. Something must be wrong with this, because eventually you will cut pretty much all frequencies away and you will just destroy the whole tone of the instrument. So what's happening here? Why do we do this? Every time you boost a certain frequency, it will always sound bad. Like, for example, I have keys here. Pretty much everything you boost, you feel like something is wrong with it and you want to cut it. So how do we avoid this? This is when this whole defining range thing is so important, is because without boosting anything, we should be able to name exactly which are the range that needs treatment. And that is why we need to define these ranges. This also requires a little bit of ear training, so it will take some time for you to build up your own frequency library. But just know that you have to have this certain like range in your head. I kind of recognize low mid sounds like this. You have to have a certain things that kind of help you define the ranges. So let's listen to the bass. And I need to listen to it completely flat, not just listen to it in solo, actually listen to the whole mix as a whole. Firstly, we listen and we name the range. So here we can hear that the bass is in the way is a bit big. So I would say the range is a bit of a problem right now, would be like low mid. So it'll be around 100 and 500 hertz-ish. I think this range right now is covering what the keys is doing, because the keys is actually the main thing right now in this little track here. What we're going to do is, because I named it and now I know exactly the problem, I need to exaggerate the problem to confirm it, and I just confirmed it. Yes, it is around this range. Then you cut it. So let's listen to before and after. You can definitely hear the keys is more present and it's a bit more upfront, but I didn't do anything with the keys. All I did was cutting the right frequency range for the bass. So this is a really like simple example of how I think the order really matters. There's also another way, is to cut it and find it. Cut and sweep until you hear the problem disappears. So I think this method actually requires even more ear training. Like I said, both ways actually works and they both generate the same result, and just find which one works for you. Same goes to boosting, by the way. If you hear something good, electric guitar right here, I think when it's flat right now, it can add a little bit more plugginess to it. And I'm listening to it in context, knowing that the electric guitar has these plugginess in it. It can come out a little more, maybe drive the song, the groove a little more. Same order, when it's flat, identified. I think the high mid range is a good range to boost, and it highlights the character and also drives the song groove, keeps it going, the momentum is nice. So let's go back to our little diagram again, because I know the sound of high mid and that's in my library. So let's go for 1K to 4K. Before. After. I know it's not a crazy mind-blowing example where you hear it, it's like, wow, but like mixing is always these little subtle things that kind of builds on top of each other, and little bits of pieces here and there compile together and makes a great mix. So let's talk about balance. Let's try and balance this song in front of us with just EQ. So we've done a little bit, but let's get rid of it because the order matters. So let's work on the tree trunk. Have you guys watched the previous videos we've done? I kind of talked a little bit about the tree trunk being the bass, drums, and vocals. In this case, there's no vocal present because it's an MMO. So we're just going to treat the drums and the bass as the foundation of the song, and then we start adding instruments in, and then we listen to everything in context. So the first thing we want to figure out is the drums and the bass, if there is any frequency that is in the way. So let's create some separation. This is the drum EQ on the right, and this is the bass EQ on the left. What I really want to work on right now is getting a cleaner low end. So for this foundation part, I can tell that there is something in the kick drum that is interfering with the bass, and there's also something in the bass that is also interfering with the kick drum. And I think kick drum and bass relationship is one of the most important relationship you need to get down first in a mix. It will save you so much time, and you don't need to like basically go in circles after you've done everything and try to find like what is that thing that's like bugging the mix or like masking the whole mix. So diagram out again. The bass is definitely taking the sub frequency, while these frequency on the blue side here, maybe it'll overlap a bit, but I think the kick is more like 70 and above. It's kind of on a higher kick. There will be some songs that's like the other way around. First things first, clean up the drums. So maybe we cut off excessive like unnecessary sub, inaudible. So you kind of let the low end of the bass kind of flow out. Second thing is that I find the bass 100 to 500 hertz in the way of the kick itself. So I want to create more space for the kick so it feels a little bit punchier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and cut and I'm going to sweep until I find that frequency where I'm like, definitely like cleaner. So right now, this is all I've done to try and balance the two. I think the bass is so full spectrum. I decided to have the low mid frequencies out of the way. So right now I can really hear the kick, the hi-hats, everything is clearer just by cutting a little bit of the low mid away. And for the drums, I wanted the kick to be punchier. I like the 70-ish hertz, the sub, I wanted that to come out. I also boosted a little bit of the low mids because now that the bass is out of the way, I also feel like the body of the snare rim is around the low mids area. I really like that, so I want to boost that. And I really like, you know, the percussions, the hi-hat, everything in the air, so that's why I also decided to boost that. So now we can also listen to it in context with everything. I'm going to quickly try and do just pure EQ to try and get the best balance, and then we'll get back to you. Let's time-lapse this shit. Okay, we're back. I cheated because I used mid-side on the electric guitar, but let's explore. So for the keys, I boosted 1K and I turned it to the mid frequency, and the reason for being this and the electric guitar was clashing in this frequency. So let's listen to the relationship between the two of them. Nothing. For the electric guitar, I took away the mid of this area. The reason for being is I want the keys to be the main thing that is doing the low mids, but at the same time I don't want to cut all the electric guitar, so I just cut the mid frequency so that the side you can still hear that low mid helping the track a little bit. Earlier we did like a stereo boost of this high mid frequency, but right now I only boosted the sides because after the keys treatment, now that this EG is sounding more present, I don't need all of the signal to do this. I want it to sound like it's scratching my ear a bit. Let's listen to these four. So last but not the least, with the synths, this is what I did. Took a little bit of the high mids again, maybe kind of closer to the highs. So the keys is rolled off in the high frequency. So as the electric guitar. Felt like nothing was in the higher register in the track, so I think the synth can carry that. Basically, it's the only instrument that has that frequency right now, except for drums. Drums is a very full spectrum thing, but it is a groovy thing, not a constant, like, sustained thing. And so my decision for the synth is it will take full power in that frequency, in that section, to balance the whole song and to make it sound fuller and everything. So I decided I will boost it and not just leave it. Second thing is I cut off quite a bit of lows. Pretty much has no sub. The focus is to clean up the whole low mid so that the bass can thrive. And the kick can be super punchy because you have so much space for them to come through. I had the decision of cutting the low mids, which is like around 400-ish hertz. This area was really clashing with the keys because the keys has this area right here. So I wanted to take away the muddiness of it. So now let's listen to the whole thing. I hope this is a good example about using EQ to make space for each other in the whole frequency spectrum and helping the whole song balance tonally. So that's it. That is the basics of EQ. So I really hope this video helped you. Now you have the tools to not just mess around and hope for the best. You know exactly what the parameters do. You can now create separation between instruments and create a tonal balance in a song. I really hope that after this video, we can clear up all the confusions that you had with EQ and you can really use the all-important order that we talked about. Listen to it when it's flat and then able to identify the frequency range that needs treatment and not just sweep around and try to cut everything. So if there's any other topics you would like us to include in this basic series, please leave it down in the comments below. And don't forget our 4-step vocal mixing guide also in the description box below. There is so much more in a vocal mixing chain, and we hope that now that you have the tools of compression and EQ, you're able to execute the best vocal mixing you've ever done. So that's it. Remember to subscribe to us for mixing content. Like it if you find this video helpful and share it with your friends. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Bye!